Hello, my name is Tina Beattie and I'm the founder and facilitator of the Catholic Women Speak Network, and I'm also the director of Catherine of Siena College, an online college based at the University of Roehampton which offers courses in theology, gender and social justice. I'm delighted that you've joined us for these conversations with women from around the world about what it means to be a woman of faith in a time when we face unprecedented global challenges, struggles and opportunities. I talk to different women in different cultures and contexts to ask them how they are experiencing the coronavirus pandemic and its aftermath, some of the political and economic turmoil surrounding us, and what their faith means in times like these in terms of how they rise to the challenges and what creative energies they find within themselves to be part of the movement for change that's sweeping through the world at the moment in many new and often challenging ways. If you want to find out more about any of the people I'm in dialogue with, please visit our website catholicwomenspeak.com, where you can find longer biographies, and you can also find the YouTube videos of the interviews and sometimes resources for reading and watching more about the people I'm in dialogue with. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Mary Colwell, who is a writer and well-known environmentalist. Many of you will have come across her books and her work. You can find out more about her on our Catholic Women Speak website. Mary's passion for the environment, her ability to engage people across a range of cultures and issues about these urgent concerns is something I'm sure we'll hear more about from her today. So welcome, Mary. I would ask you just to begin by telling us a little about what the last few months have been like for you. I think you've been mainly based in Bristol in the UK during this time, have you?
Yes, the whole time. Actually, just before I was writing in Scotland, and up in Scotland where I was in the Highlands, there wasn't a sense of urgency and impending doom that there was in England. And my husband kept phoning up saying, "Are you sure you don't want to come back yet? Maybe you should think about coming back." And I got back literally just as everything shut down. It was quite a surreal experience going from a place of exclusion, really. It was so secluded and quiet and out of the way up near Fort William. And I entered the real world as I got further south, if you know, the real in terms of the number of people talking about it and all in the news and so on. And suddenly it was a very different reality. But ever since then, I've been in Bristol.
And how's it been? I mean, on different fronts, I suppose. There's your environmental work, there's your experience of lockdown with the churches and things and how that felt, and some of your insights and visions. So let's just start by going back to when you were actually physically in lockdown. What were the main insights and struggles for you during that time?
The overwhelming feeling at first, to be quite honest, Tina, was thank goodness everything's been cancelled. That sounds very strange, but I was so grateful for some time, for a reason to say I'm now going to be at home and I'm not going to start dashing around and being on a train or driving or whatever. And it was a complete revelation to me how much better I felt the emptier my diary got. It was a direct relationship between seeing things that go from the diary, not that I didn't think they were important or they were great, but the fact that I suddenly saw time opening up again. It was an extraordinary feeling. So my initial feeling, put aside all the worry and the concern and so on, and the awfulness of it, but for me, the initial feeling was overwhelmingly of relief, actually. And that has never gone. And I know we keep hearing people saying, oh, it's been great, I'm not going to be as busy again. I really am not going to be that busy again, because I'm not sure I achieve any more by doing it. That was one of the insights. I think I achieve just as much by doing this as I do by dashing around.
I really share all of that. I had exactly the same feeling. Suddenly the diary was empty, and then owing to challenges facing the universities, I discovered I could even take voluntary severance during this time. So actually my resolution not to get too busy again was certainly helped by the fact that I'm not going back to work.
Amazing.
So things work together. I wonder, in terms of that cancellation and silence, you must have been more aware than many of us of the impact of this on the environment and nature.
I thought it was extraordinary. I mean, I thought it was absolutely extraordinary. It was like Extinction Rebellion's all their dreams come true at once. I mean, suddenly no one was driving or flying, dashing around. Suddenly everyone was taking a bit more time to do things. You know, suddenly everybody was noticing. Obviously, I'm not saying they wanted the virus, but what they did want was for everybody to stop for a while and reassess. And that's exactly what happened. And so it was a bit of a double-edged sword for me, because although I spend a lot of time writing at home, suddenly there were lots of people about, and I wasn't used to all these people in the house. But it worked really well, so that was fine. And then I think, like everybody else, you just start to bed in. You get over the sort of strangeness of it at first. And you start to think, well, this is the way it is now. And I would sit in the garden for more than I've ever, in the last 2 or 3 decades, have I sat in the garden and noticed birds. Everybody's been talking about the sound of birds, and it really was, even right in the middle of Bristol, you know where I live, Tina, right in the centre of Bristol. And the bird song was really loud. And people were sending me, friends were sending me little WhatsApps. They'd gone outside and recorded this bird singing and saying, this is amazing, what is it? You know, and it was a great tit. So it's always been there, but people hadn't had the headspace, and I understand that, to take it all in, to listen. You can hear, but you might not listen. And so that became very obvious, that surround sound that was accompanying the days became very precious to many of us, I think. And I also noticed what was happening in the garden more. So I have a very small city garden, but I do have some bird feeders. And the same birds come at the same time of day, really. They sort of have a little commuter trail that they go around all the gardens. And they became sort of everyday friends. They just became the birds. Oh, it's that time, you know. Oh, it's that blackbird singing, because one blackbird that sings every day in the garden has learned to imitate a ringing phone. So I knew when it was there, because suddenly the phone rang outside. And there were all these lovely little insights into the natural world, which in your very busy days, we don't take time, because it takes time to let the world absorb into you. And I wasn't giving myself that time. And I go on about how important the natural world is all the time. And I was humbled by how little I engaged with it on a day-to-day basis until I was forced to. And I thought that was revelatory. Did you find the same thing, Tina?
I did. I always think of you as this person who's ultimately in touch with nature. You've walked the John Muir Trail. You walked from the west of Ireland to the east coast of England to raise awareness about the threat to curlews. So if even you were finding this new relationship with nature, that makes me think how amazing it was for the rest of us, because I too noticed the birds, owls at night, every kind of bird during the day. I was looking on my little app several times a day to see what bird that was, and they would be a song thrush or something, yeah, something common that I just wasn't paying attention to before. And the wildflowers on our walks were just a discovery and a revelation. But something that also interests me, particularly in my discussion with you, Mary, I know you're writing a book on predators at the moment. And I know that you get impatient with many environmental approaches, including, I have to say, Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, about an approach to nature which doesn't strike you as sufficiently robust. And one of the things that I've been thinking about during this crisis is that I think I'm right in saying COVID-19 is also part of nature. You know, Pope Francis talks about Mother Earth in the same sentimental way he talks about mothers. But part of me thinks Mother Earth has also given us COVID-19, albeit maybe through our own misuse of resources, but that's what may happen.
Absolutely. And you know, The virus, which is COVID-19, is just as much a part of the natural world as the song thrush you were listening to on your walks, Tina. And so, but that's the side of nature we don't like to talk about. And it's very obvious in the sort of religious world, if you like, that there's a lot of talk of, as you say, Mother Earth and the beauty of God's creation and so on, as though the natural world is just a lot of blooming flowers and pretty sunsets. And of course, that isn't that, and it's demeaning to make it into that. The natural world is so much more complex, so much more layered, so much more challenging than that. And that's why I'm so in love with it, I suppose, is that it challenges you on every single aspect of your being. There are those beautiful things in it. There are those sunsets, there are those birds, there are those flowers, which take your breath away. I saw one yesterday. I was walking in Somerset yesterday, through a field, and just stopped and picked up this brilliant orange tiny little flower. I think it was a form of Scarlet Pimpernel, but against the green of the leaf, it was unbelievably beautiful in a sort of diminutive little world of beauty. And yet also there are things that can bite and sting and scratch, and in parts of the world there are poisonous snakes that could kill you, or there's the earth can suddenly shake itself and 10,000 people are dead. There are viruses that exist in wild animals that sort of circulate in an ecosystem, say out in a forest, which when we damage that forest is released into our world. There are things which are really dangerous and not very beautiful out there. And we have to recognize the world for what it is. Otherwise, when this beautiful Mother Earth turns around and kills you, or kills someone you're close to, or causes a pandemic, you're thrown into dissonance because you don't know what to make of that. If the earth puts its loving arms around you one minute and then breaks your neck the next, what are we supposed to make of that? And that was my only really major criticism of Laudato Si, in that it was a very sentimental document in terms of beauty. It said some very wise things about our treatment of the earth. But it had this misty-eyed, sentimental view of the natural world, which I think does more harm than good in the end, because we don't face reality as we should. You can sit out in a nice, beautiful, sunny garden and really enjoy it like we have been doing, and then you get stung by a wasp. So what do you make of that? And what's the theology behind that? And who is the God behind it all that can do that? And I think, as David Attenborough said, why would I believe in a God who creates a worm that can only live in a child's eye? And that's the reality of what we have to face. So I think that the Catholic world, the whole religious world actually, has a lot of hard thinking to do about the nature of this planet, the actual nature of it. And it's a fascinating, when you do start to think about it more, as to why there are earthquakes and why there are dangerous animals and so on, we all fit into then a grand pattern, which is exhilarating. And I could never be a creationist, Tina, because the thought that God waved a magic wand and suddenly the earth is as it is now, I mean, how uninteresting is that? The fact that we have this diversity of form and function, and that the way that creatures and the landscapes interact with each other is nuanced almost by an inch basis around this planet, because of the way that we live on a moving earth. The plates are always moving, volcanoes going off, earthquakes and so on. We live on a dynamic planet that's constantly changing, and the life on it constantly changes too. And we're part of that constant change. And all these things evolve out of that change, and they can be dangerous to us or not. The earth doesn't really care about us. And I think that's a very humbling thing to accept. And not many religions like to accept that the natural world is indifferent to our existence. But I think we're being shown that it really, really is.
And of course, if we used the wisdom that is available to us in a way that isn't that what the end of the book of Job is saying, stop moaning about your human problems, ghastly though they are, and look around you, just look. And I often find that last part of the book of Job is, I feel like this tiny, tiny speck in an unspeakably amazing cosmos, but unspeakably terrifying as well. What does that do to your faith to broaden your vision, to take in what seems to us like the violence and the suffering and the indifference of the earth to us?
It's a hard question to answer, really. What does it do to my faith? Because faith exists in me anyway, in different levels, I suppose. Have a very personal, I feel, relationship with this extraordinary, powerful God that is behind the whole of this universe. And that's a privilege it's hard to get your head around. But also there's this ruthlessness to God, which is quite scary as well. But the fact I feel held by a massively dynamic God is such a strange feeling, isn't it? And you don't get that anywhere else, really. So what has it done? It's made me a lot more humble. It's made me a lot more accepting of big things. It's made me understand the pandemic in particular, I think, has just been such a wake-up call that it's as though we've just overstepped the line. That's what it feels like to me. And it feels like that we can do so much. We are allowed to do so much, if you like, to keep body and soul together and give ourselves a standard of living. But we can just go that bit too far. And we are going that bit too far all the time at the moment. So to erase a natural forest and all those creatures in it, and then to sort of just put our own world on top of it and not expect some comeback, i.e. a virus leaping between ecosystems, it was always going to happen. And there's this sense of, of just huge sorrow that we can't accept that there is so much invested in the economic system set up on the planet that we can't stop doing that, because just too much depends on us taking. So all of that has fed into my, I think, a lot less human-centered approach to faith, that God cares about all of it, actually. He cares about the COVID virus as much as he cares about us, I think, sometimes, because we're all part of this huge order of dynamism and energy and change and wonder. And I just feel very privileged to be playing a tiny little bit of a part of that, just for a handful of years. That's all it is. We're just a handful of years in something that's eons old. And that sense of awe, I think, accompanies me every day.
And when we think about that and the time we're at now, it feels to me as if we're on a sort of precipice, on the very cliff edge of a time of decision, maybe our last chance to decide what's best, because it feels as if COVID-19 has been the most challenging, but it's only been one in a series of increasing disasters in recent years. And it showed how very quickly we can change our habits. Pollution levels have dropped. Just overnight, the whole world managed to change.
I don't know if you've read a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she is a Native American lady who is also a professor of botany. And she wrote a beautiful book where she combines the sort of wisdom of her traditional, her ancestral tribe, with being a modern botanist in America. And there's lots and lots of beautiful insights in the book. But one that struck me very much the other day was that some of the elders in her tribe said they're waiting for the day when these newcomers, which is us, I suppose, Westerners going into America all those hundreds of years ago, when are we going to start acting like we want to stay and not that we're just visiting? Because if you just visit someone, if you're not rooted somewhere, then you just take, I'll have that, because I'm off in a bit. But if you know that where you are, where you're rooted, where you put down roots, it's very sort of biological, isn't it? Has to sustain those roots, then you do things a little differently. And the world has been so rootless for a long time. We've traveled so much and become people that just feel we can go anywhere and do anything, that we never feel like we're settled. So we're never going to behave in this way, that actually this is where I'm staying. And I think there was a lot of wisdom in that. And that I remember thinking about that for a long time after I heard her talk about that. what has it done to us, this extraordinary life that we've all got into of never staying still. It has so many ramifications. We forget, as we've just been saying, we forget to look and listen carefully and slowly and carefully. And then we also don't measure in a sensible way what we take, because we're always going to be off. So that idea, when are we going to start behaving like we want to stay, is a very beautiful way of thinking about how to live. And I don't know what the equivalent in Christianity is. And I've been thinking about that, because that's part of the sort of the greater wisdom of the peoples of the earth, which we can all learn from, I think. You know, we all learn from each other, but that is something I think that Christianity needs to fold into its understanding of the environment, is what is it to be a Christian on a living planet? What is that? Identify it, crystallize it out for me, because I haven't heard it talked about enough. I haven't heard it being urged from the pulpit, or from, not that I've ever read particularly anyway, that means something to you and me. I don't mean quite high-end theology. I mean people who just go to church on a Sunday. Who's giving that message of compassion, rootedness, humility, mindfulness, the you know, the modern mindfulness meets traditional Christianity, where who's bringing all that together for a new synthesis, a new post-COVID synthesis of what it is to be a Christian in today's world. It's a time of great opportunity if we can get that right. But I think we've got a lot of joining the dots to do. We've got a lot of listening with humility to other people's teachings. And we're not good at that. We are not good at that. And there are a lot of very wise understandings of the world out there, which we could well do with adopting and assimilating into our own worldview too. Then I think we'll be on a different path. But at the moment, as you say, it feels like we're being urged to go back to not a new normal, but the old normal. And because actually this thing will all just go away and it'll be fine and we'll just deal with it on a piecemeal basis. But come on, let's spend, grow. I think it's a very difficult one to gather together, because people need to live, and there is a lot of hardship in COVID as well. And that's the other thing that I feel so privileged to not have felt stressed during this time, because I know friends of mine with young families have definitely had a very different experience.
That's one of the challenges I think we're facing at the moment, is holding together. Like you, I found lockdown an immensely liberating time of learning and reflecting and being, and yet also aware of the absolute horrors facing people with young children cooped up all day and trying to work, as most young parents do, and also of course those with older relatives in care homes or disabled loved ones in care homes. So I was, there was that awareness, and now the huge economic hardships that are going to emerge. But I guess one of my sadnesses listening to you was that during lockdown, it seemed to me a missed opportunity for religious leaders, for our own Catholic leaders, to say, go outside and pray to the God of all creation, live Laudato Si. And instead, all they seemed able to think about was opening churches so people could pray. I know churches are important. I know mass attendance matters very, very deeply to many Catholics. But I just felt, why not use this time? You and I both know the scholar and environmentalist Nick Mayhew Smith, and he makes the point that the early Christians in Britain didn't have churches. Their whole lives of liturgy and worship were outdoors. And when the first missionaries came, before they could baptize the people, they baptized nature, they baptized the waters. They somehow saw that all of creation is alive and alive in Christ, and baptized it into their faith. And that strikes me, that's one way of putting down roots and saying, we've come to stay, this is where we belong, and bringing all natural species and creatures with you. There's so much in all traditions, including our own, that we haven't yet laid claim to.
I agree with you. I was waiting for some great insight. I was waiting for some great joyful sort of understanding, some great words of comfort about the earth and how it works, and what this means for us all, and how we can learn and move on and grow from it. But I didn't hear any of that. So it is a tremendous pity. And I know you and I've talked about it, Tina, but I don't know what the answer is, other than we need to get the clergy to be naturalists. They need to do my GCSE in natural history. I might sign them all up.
That's another great project you've taken on. I just have to tell people that you have now been successful in
last hurdle.
Promoting the idea that children need to be educated in this from a very young age. But I do think there's energy for change. You know, these interviews, I can't remember how many women I've spoken to around the world, but you're one in a line of them. And this energy for change, so many have said to me, we're not going back to the way things were. And I do think there is that energy. And, I suppose in times like these, I think it's about resilience, resistance, and hope, and being willing to work with those things and not give up faith in them.
And I think what it is as well, Tina, is realizing, I mean, what I've learned through doing my curlew work is this beautiful bird, which is very hidden from our lives, really. Nobody, I mean, you'd need to go and look for it. It doesn't live in your garden, or on the pond in the city park. It's out there in the middle of fields or on wetlands or something. But it has a very beautiful and haunting call. But to know it is to love it. And I think what the curlew has done is show that what people are capable of if they love something. And you don't need a reason to love it. You don't need it because I better look after this thing, because if I don't, people lose their jobs, or they're going to die, or something terrible is going to happen. I mean, if the curlew disappeared, who knows? Probably we wouldn't even notice. The world would carry on. But the fact is, they inspire something in a lot of people. It's become really obvious recently. They inspire a sense of wanting to gather around. And that's what the natural world can do. That's what we do. We gather together in the natural world, and we focus on something which just inspires you. It just literally makes your heart leap. And that's where I want us to focus. I don't want, and part of the whole idea behind the GCSE in natural history is it would be the biggest sin for us to pass on this world to the next generation as nothing more than a problem to be solved. It isn't. It is a problem, but it's far, far more than that. It is this wellspring of what it is to be human. And being able to gather around a bird like a curlew, all these people have come together from right across the different spectrums of conservation world and classes and whatever, have come together and say, I really care about this, and I really want to make it work. And I really want to work with that person I wouldn't normally sit down and have a cup of tea with, because together we can make the world better for this bird. And there's no reason for that other than we just love it. And sometimes you just need something to love, Tina, and all this, everything else just kind of falls into place. But if everything is always a crisis that we've got to battle against, I don't know how we're going to win it, because I don't think we ever will win it with that mentality.
And I think one of the things that interests me is the understanding of desire, the best understanding of desire, certainly in the tradition I know best, which would be the Catholic theological tradition, is that God draws us to God through desire. Yeah. And it's always through materiality, because we are material creatures, and everything that draws us to God is somehow within the beauty of the material world and creation. And I agree. I don't think guilt tripping and doom mongering move the human heart at all. We don't act through fear. We act through desire and joy and love. And your work with the curlew for me is a wonderful example of that. I always think of Blake's saying, he who would do good to another must do it in minute particulars. The general good is the cry of the scoundrel and the hypocrite. And when I see you caring for this one tiny endangered bird among all the millions of species of the earth, I do feel that love. And yes, I could do this. I can't save every bird in the world forevermore, but I could save one species. And I think that sort of allowing ourselves to be called by love to what we're called to do, and doing it with everything we have, really, is an amazing thought.
It is, and I'd urge people to find what it is that makes their heart just glow. And for me, it's not just curlews, but curlews are quite big. You know me, Tina. Some people think I'm obsessed.
I'm going to let you talk about curlews a little bit, Mary. I'm going to do this.
But I was with this lovely young woman yesterday who was just so in love with flowers, and wildflowers in the sides of ordinary fields, and we spent the most lovely few hours walking and identifying and collecting flower heads, and to working out what potions and what teas you can make out of them, because the world will give back to you. And that's the other thing that I've sort of knew about before, but grown in sort of depth with, is the sheer wonder of abundance. I mean, we live in an abundant planet, and it gives back with abundance. If only we just take time to look and we treat it with respect, it will just give. It's unbelievably giving, the natural world. And in a way that I would love to be as abundant as wildflowers.
Yes.
But,
Of course, part of that is the whole rewilding project, which
yes.
is the recognition that actually, if we leave nature be, it may be far more fruitful and beneficial for us as well as our constant interference.
Yes, rewilding is a fascinating concept, and it's we could talk for hours about rewilding. It's a catch-all phrase that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it's not so much rewilding as somebody put it. He said, this bloke, I was in Scotland not long ago, he said, I don't particularly go with the word rewilding, but I do like the word rehabiting. So allowing things to rehabit where they once lived. And it might not be in a wild way, but it might be in a way that's wild enough, because a lot of the natural world doesn't demand us to disappear. It doesn't want us to. It doesn't care whether we're there or not half the time, as long as we allow it the space to be, to give it what it needs, and it can rehabit the planet that it's meant to live on. And I think that's a nice way. So rewilding has a sense of get rid of the people. Rehabiting is just come back. We promise to give you the space to be what you want to be. And I think that's a very nice way of thinking about the future, that it isn't a future without us. It's very much a future with us. But it's much more as a sort of fellow travelers on an exciting journey towards God than a master slave, I'll take, you give relationship, which is what we have at the moment. The whole drive behind what I do, the work with the curlews, the work with the GCSE, the book I'm writing at the moment is just to find that time to love the other. And the other, we talk about loving the other in terms of our human communities, and maybe love is the wrong word as well. Cherish the other. Love is very overused. It's a cherishing that we need to do. It's a wonderful root to that word cherishing, which gathers together lots to do with charity and compassion, and to cherish the other and to see the other in relation to ourselves, not just as an object, but as something that's got this spark of the divine in it. This lovely Hindu idea that everything is a spark of Shiva, everything is a spark of God, spark of Christ in the world. And that, to me, what a beautiful planet that is to live on, in every sense, whether it's terrifying or not, it's absolutely magnificent. And we've got to make the planet magnificent again in our eyes, heroic and wonderful and awesome and terrifying. It's got to be all those things, because when we feel those things, we're more than fully human.